Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Still with you on today's edition of Cairo Local Time. And as promised earlier today, we'll be discussing the industrial sector, which is a key driver in the National Economic Development Plan. We're delighted to be joined over the telephone by His Excellency Ambassador Gamal Bayoumi, the Secretary General of the Arab Investors Union. A very good afternoon to you, Mr. Ambassador.
Good afternoon. How are you?
Fine, thank you, sir. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, Mr. Ambassador, President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi has recently underlined the need to increase industrial investment and export levels in Egypt. Why is the industrial sector key or a key driver of the Egyptian economy at this current stage?
We have here two fronts to work on. The first, that Egypt, since Gamal Abdel Nasser, 1986, 68, we decided to join the General Agreement on Paris and Trade, GATT.
Yes.
This means that we agree to liberalize our foreign trade. This means that we agree upon the competition. The secret word here is competition. If we are producing just for the local market, then we can produce whatever we want and whatever the local market would accept. But we accepted the challenge of opening our market with the GATT. Then we have a free trade area with the Arab world. We have a big free trade area with Africa, started years ago, but during the presidency of Egypt to the African Union, we enlarged the African free trade area to combine the 51 countries. And we have the biggest challenge, which is the association agreement with Europe, the European Union.
Yes.
What does this mean? It means that we are open to markets of 2,000 million inhabitants. We can export to them. Same time, we shall import from them without any trade barriers or custom duties.
Yes.
This will put a big burden on our producers and our industry. Here, because of that, we started early in the 90s, the industrial modernization program. And it is a very ambitious program. We start by $1 billion investment on this to modernize our industries. If I talk about modernizing industry, everybody would think we are bringing new machines. No, this is of course in our mind, but we start by the persons.
Yes.
To produce a clever
workforce,
to produce much efficient person who is producing whether agriculture or industry. Then we come to the institution itself to see how it is working. The capital is enough. Do we bring them the resources for industry easy, exempted from custom duties, from the best places to bring those components? Then three, are we helping them to export? Because now it's not enough just to produce, you have to export.
Yes.
Why? Because we want to develop this country 3 times the size of the birth rate. This put on ourselves a challenge, not to produce, but to produce perfectly according to the international standards. And as a matter of fact, it's not something very difficult. We can do it. We're exporting. Now Egypt is becoming one of the best countries exporting house effects, which exporting some agricultural products everywhere, even to Europe, to the Arab dimension, and to the African countries.
Yes.
This is the background of this. Now the president himself is visiting the subject, and I'm glad that it is now under the office of the president.
Indeed.
We shall give more and more attention to modernize the industry, to bring our industry to modern life, to make available to this industry all it needs in order to produce more, to cover much more than the Egyptian market,
yes,
to export, and this means investment means more jobs. This means we shall meet the aims of our young generation.
Yes, indeed. Now, Mr. Ambassador, the government is also keen on establishing new industrial zones and complexes. And how does this help in enhancing the industrial sector inside Egypt, sir?
This is very important also because it makes you get rid of the headache, all the headaches. The industrial zone, it is as if it is a part of Egypt, but not abide to the Egyptian laws at all. It is international. We are doing this in Port Said, in the Suez Canal zone in general. So a company can come, produce, and do whatever they want without any interference of the bureaucracy.
Yes.
No taxation, no custom duties, and then they use our workers, they use our raw material, and they produce what we need, and they produce what we want to export also. This is the idea behind the free zones.
Yes, right. Mr. Ambassador, I want to ask you, sir, in your opinion, what are some of the kinds of industries that need to be introduced and localized in Egypt to help the economy and bridge the gap between imports and exports?
Very good question, because we suffer in Egypt and in the Arab whole countries about the following. If you look to the details of our foreign trade, you will find that 70% of what we are importing, we do not produce, which are three items. One is machines. We do not produce a lot of machines. Second is ways and means of transportation. We do not produce cars or buses or whatever, or ships. The third is a big challenge, which is food. We are importing food in a country like Egypt, or where we are close to Sudan or close to Iraq. We can produce either in Egypt or in those countries in order to cover what do we need of our food. So the three dimensions here are very important. We give most of our investment in the Arab world and in Egypt goes to the services. We make a lot of housing, a lot of hotels, a lot of banking system, Suez Canal, tourism, and this is almost half of our production. We want now to produce something in material, industry and agriculture. And this is the challenge we are facing now.
Indeed. Right. Mr. Ambassador, now, the coronavirus crisis has put the pharmaceutical industry in the limelight and created a high demand for medical equipment, medical products, medicine, etc. How do you see Egypt responding to this and benefiting from it in an industrial sense?
Thank God for two things. First, that we started our economic reform.
Yes.
Much ahead before the epidemic. We started our economic reform in November 2016. So when the disease came, we were already in a good position.
Yes.
That's why they will tell you that Egypt is different from most of the world countries. Most of the world countries are diminishing the economy. Here, Egypt was still growing positively. This is one thing.
Yes.
The second, that we are opening our market for investors to come and invest in our country, and we are ameliorating this situation. We hope that with that will make our industry able to produce more and more efficiently and export.
Indeed. Mr. Ambassador, let's talk a bit about the private sector. In your opinion, how is it involved in the industrial sector? How important is it attracting more investments to this sector, in your opinion, Mr. Ambassador?
In any country in the world, most of the production of the industrial sector depends on the private sector. And one gentleman from Germany lectured us a few years ago about how Germany became the largest exporter in the world in 2009. And he showed us that 80% of what Germany is exporting is coming from small and medium and very small size industry belongs to the private sector. Because government cannot produce bottoms or produce small things like that. Maybe government would produce steel and iron or big industries. But we need the private sector in order to help us in this field.
Absolutely.
One problem here that there is a sort of a current in the public opinion defending the public sector and trying to attack the private sector, thinking that the private sector shouldn't succeed or shouldn't win a lot of money. This is not acceptable at all, and the government and the whole society must be very clear. Do we need private sector to help us and go ahead with our economic performance or not? Otherwise, we shall lose this battle completely. But I am quite sure that the government and the president is showing every now and then that they are with the private sector, encouraging them. Look to the banking system here, and many programs are talking about how you can borrow some small or big sum of money and establish your own project. This means that we are with the idea of more and more involvement of the private sector.
Absolutely. One final question, Mr. Ambassador. In addition to the traditional industries known inside Egypt, new industries are now needed, like high-tech and communication technology, etc. How do you see Egypt moving in this direction, sir?
It's moving very good, and I will tell you some good news here.
Yes.
Because we received a few years ago the number 2 in one of the biggest information technology companies in the world, and he told us that the sector of information technology in Egypt is growing much more than any other sector.
Right.
Thanks to our new generation. I am proud of my grandson who is teaching me how to use my computer. They are genius.
Yes.
And of course they are able, much more than myself or my generation, to produce programs and to produce such technology, and we have started to export it now. The second sector is, of course, housing, and we need still to go further more for housing and more buildings.
Right. All right, Mr. Ambassador, Ambassador Gamal Bayoumi, the Secretary General of the Arab Investors Union, I'd like to thank you very, very much, Your Excellency, for your time and your insight on today's edition. And this wraps up today's episode of Cairo Local Time. Do join us again just after 4 p.m. for a new episode. Till then, you're in the company of myself and Meher. Many thanks for watching.